Hi, I'm Schadt, CEO of DoubleHorn. Today I'm joined by Fred Tavan, Chief Analytics and Innovation Officer at Vida Capital. How are you, Fred?
Very good, thanks. Happy to be here and see your offices, so thanks for having me.
Great. Yeah. Today we're going to talk about leadership, strategy, and of course, Vida Capital. Yeah. But before we dive in, tell us a little bit about your path and how you landed in the role of Chief Data Analytics and Innovation Officer at Vida Capital.
Sure. So I would say that I consider myself a hybrid, and I like to work with people who are hybrids. And the reason why I say that is because I actually didn't start my career off in the finance area. I started out in engineering, University of Waterloo in Canada, in electrical and computer engineering.
Oh, wow.
That university works with co-op programs, so I was actually able to work in the engineering field for a couple of years. I was in telecommunications, flight simulators, stuff like that. So I did a lot of technical stuff, designing operating systems, designing circuit boards, and so on and so forth. So that kind of background gave me a solid footing, with the finance area. So when I graduated, I actually decided to change my career and go and become an actuary. So that's what brought me into the finance world.
Okay.
And it's the combination of those two fields that I find makes me a hybrid, and that's kind of what's allowed me to combine the finance world with the heavy duty kind of big data analytics world, and kind of make sense out of all of it. Not too many executives have those two backgrounds, and we're able to kind of bring it all together. So usually, if you just have one, you need to bring in consultants or other people, and it kind of makes it a lot more challenging to kind of do things in a small team. So,
talk about the innovation part.
Right, sure.
So that makes complete sense on the data analytics. You're bringing a technical mindset together with actuarials and very detailed, numerical patterns. So that equals data analytics. I get there, but let's talk about the innovation for a minute.
Right. So the innovation, to me, there's actually quite a bit of overlap between today's advanced analytics and using that to generate innovation. So that's kind of the lead-in. What happened is at my previous employer, which is one of the largest financial institutions in the world in the insurance, life and health insurance, they wanted to start doing a lot more innovation compared to what they had done in the past. So they actually made me the global head of their innovation lab.
Oh, cool.
And that's what actually got me into the innovation world as well. As part of that, I had to start interacting a lot more with the startup world and see, what was happening to disrupt the market. That created a link for me to Silicon Valley, so I started going there a lot more regularly, working with accelerators and just being exposed to a lot of new ideas that were going to create all this disruption.
Yeah.
So that's my connection to innovation. And since I started that, now it's about 3-4 years ago, I've been doing a lot of self-education on top of kind of being exposed to Silicon Valley, and also being part of leading the innovation lab to kind of bring new ideas to the table and bring them to execution.
Right. Good. Let's jump into leadership a little bit. So, over your career, and I'm somewhat familiar with your background in preparing for today. Some phenomenal exposure in senior roles. When you identify, let me ask a two-part question. What attributes kind of signal to you you've got somebody on your hands that if you mold them properly, you got a really future leader on your hands? And then when you identify them, how do you mentor them, and how do you bring them through? There's always that light that goes off with certain team members or employees.
Right. Yeah, and since the beginning of my career, I've always had people reporting to me, and to me, the ability to coach them and kind of bring them along has been very important. So that's something that's just a part of who I am and I like to do. And as I became chief actuary in my previous roles, I was responsible for hundreds of people in terms of providing that kind of leadership, so on and so forth. But in terms of what kind of strikes me, I think it's a combination of things. But I start up kind of looking for someone that's got very strong technical education, very strong foundation in the technical side. Because, in my opinion, and not everybody would agree, is
This is coming from a technical guy.
Right? I mean, you can learn the communication and the soft skills in the job, but if you come to the job without the strong technical background, it's very difficult to pick that up on the fly, right? And you're going to tend to gravitate towards solutions where they're software solutions, or you'll say, well, I need a consultant to help me with this, or I need a big team to do this, or I need to form a committee to do this. And that's not how I believe the world is evolving. The world is actually going the opposite direction of, very small, very talented teams that are able to do big things.
I would agree.
So that's why if you don't have that strong technical footing, it's really difficult for you to contribute in that environment.
Yeah. So do you ever use any type of formal framework, or have you? Like in terms of, this is the way I'm going to develop my people, my team, or is it more of just a traditional reporting structure?
Again, just my own experience that I believe worked is, I took advantage of a lot of the courses, leadership courses available through the companies that I worked with over the years. There's a lot of support and training available there, so I would really encourage young people to kind of make maximum use of those things. And then there's stuff you can do on your personal time as well.
Right.
I think it's important to take that on very early in your career and make sure that you are growing that part of yourself if you are that ambitious. So those are the things that actually I look for. I look for all of those pieces along with the ability and the passion to always continuously improve. So to me, continuous improvement is not just a buzzword, it's a lifestyle. And I really like to work with people that can learn on the fly and just continuously learn new things and apply them in the real world.
I like that continuous improvement as a lifestyle. It's true. So apply that to your life. Tell us a little bit about you. I mean, how do you stay on your toes from a mentor? I mean, sometimes when you get certain levels, you're able to reach down and see a bunch of people and help them.
Right.
But that's not always the case, when you get to certain levels in your career. So how do you continuously develop yourself?
Myself. Yeah, and I think when it comes to myself is, I haven't really had, I would say, strong mentors in my own career. So I've always taken the lead myself to kind of figure out what's the next thing coming and what's the next trend, and how do I stay ahead of that trend. And I did it both, for example, when I became, when enterprise risk management was first getting off the ground, I was one of the leaders in the Society of Actuaries in the United States to kind of take that on. And I went to kind of a lot of books, a lot of research that had been done. I kind of helped the Society of Actuaries actually build that entire education system off the ground so that the next generation could be educated, right? Yeah. So to me, those are the kind of ways you start to provide mentorship. In the companies themselves, I always stayed in touch with a lot of the junior people. I like interacting with them, so on and so forth. So a lot of people, once they get to vice president level, they actually stop interacting with that level, and I think that's kind of where you lose that interaction. So the textbooks will say you actually have to do both because you gain from both. So you should have some at the top and some also interacting because you learn from the younger generation as well. So I've tried to balance that out. But at the end of the day, I would say it's a lot of what I consider keeping up has been my own initiative and my own drive. And it takes some blood and sweat, it takes some sacrifices in your family lifestyle because, my family had to be more patient with me when I had to study on weekends to learn new stuff, so on and so forth. So you got to go through some of that, and you got to be willing to put up with some of those sacrifices.
Yeah, that's impressive. And you're right. There's it's going to be handed to you. You got to go out and get it yourself.
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, you got to be resourceful if you want to make it. Right. What are the challenges in the financial sector when you look at data analytics? Like, if you had to say, here's my top 1 to 2, maybe 3, as I have to set out and deal with, is it regulatory? Is it competitiveness? Is it the volume of data? Is it the security? Where are the biggest challenges?
So I would say the challenges vary because I worked at very large financial institutions. I think it depends on the size of the company and how new they are, right? So let me explain that a little bit more. So very large financial institutions that have been around for over 150 years. They've built up a lot of legacy systems over the years,
Right.
not only from growing organically, but also through purchasing different companies along the way and so on. So what they have on their hand is a huge mess when it comes to data. And they've also realized along the way that they actually weren't that good at capturing the data that they were capturing. Even that's not been done very well.
But it's very dispersed.
So it's very dispersed. So to even try to get your head around 200 admin systems that are kind of have data all over the place, it gets so complicated so quickly. And again, the talent is not, and the leadership skill set is not there to actually break that down into pieces so they can actually kind of get going and do small improvements day by day. They get stuck into these multi-million-dollar projects, bring in consultants. Usually they're not very successful because they're trying to boil the ocean and it never really works.
Yeah.
So that's what I've observed over and over
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
not just in one institution, but in multiple institutions. The same mistake keeps happening over and over again. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. The second one in those bigger organizations as well is the legal framework, right? So they're right now with privacy, all that stuff going on. There is a shyness away from innovation because they're afraid that there might be a massive lawsuit against them. So and then they don't have the capability of saying, well, you know what, let's just experiment on a small scale, let's take a little bit of risk, so on and so forth, because they keep being worried about, oh, what if there's a big headline in the newspaper that has our name on it?
Yeah.
But that's not going to be how you're going to evolve. Then if that's where you land, you're a dinosaur, and other companies will disrupt you, right? So then we get into the newer kind of smaller companies, right? And this is where I would say, Vida is more like in that environment, and that was one of my attractions to coming to it, is because I saw an environment where I actually had the ability to kind of really execute on my vision and what I wanted to do with analytics and innovation. And I would equate that to really what's happening in China, right? Where they actually didn't have 150-year-old institutions.
Right.
They don't have institutions with 200 systems. They're actually leapfrogging because they don't have all of that baggage, right? So it's kind of the same thing now at Vida is, yeah, there's some baggage there, but I'm able to quickly kind of fix some of the issues, and we're working on that right now. Again, that's one of the reasons we signed up with DoubleHorn, get in the cloud, kind of get some things really up and running really quickly. I was able to get some talent in very quickly, so we're now up and running. We have the lights on very, very short period of time, and pennies on the dollar compared to what it would have cost with a big IT area and in a big company.
Yeah.
So I think that to me is and here, because it's much smaller teams, it's also much more nimble when it comes to the legal and regulatory issues. You don't have a team of lawyers. You don't have a team of compliance people, so on and so forth.
People that are there to tell you no.
Yeah.
Right.
So at big companies, those become the barriers, and so compliance, IT, legal, they all become barriers to innovation. In smaller companies, and this is why the startups are being so successful at disrupting very big old institutions, is they can kind of avoid all that, leapfrog all that, do it in a very small team, also take some risk in terms of experimenting, and then just move on and disrupt. Right?
Yeah, if you look at the fintech space, right, and all the startups that are really disrupting,
correct.
And then you see a trail of acquisitions, because I think what's happening, I agree with you that the large legacy companies, I mean, they have two options, right? The one that you laid out, which is usually a messy one, overbuild hours, lots of consultants, or go acquire a company that's, I forgot who it was the other day. I was reading it was a $100 million acquisition of a 20-person company just to solve something that they failed at 3 times.
Correct.
And this was a $100 billion bank.
Correct.
I mean,
that's exactly right.
So
that's the innovator's dilemma, right? So the second option you just described, it does work. It does work very quickly at the beginning. The problem is, how do you then integrate that back into the old organization and the culture clash? And the problem with that one is, you bring those people in, they can't handle this because that's not what they want.
It's change.
They'll leave.
Yeah.
Right? So either way, you actually end up having some big challenges on your hand.
Yeah, integration.
So,
yeah,
yeah.
I always say the people who are usually more difficult than the technology.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
So you talked a little bit about Vida Capital, and it's being nimble is one of its attributes. Let's just talk about it as a company in a very large. I mean, it's large players in this space. What makes it different?
So first of all, I mean the asset category that we're in is different, right? So we're not into stocks and bonds. We're into non-correlated assets, and they're related to the life insurance space, so on and so forth. So it's a bit of a unique product right now that is a blue ocean, I would say, in the U.S. industry, because not enough people are aware that you can actually, for example, trade your life insurance policy and get some money out of it, right?
Well, explain that to the folks, because I had in my research came across it, life settlement being traded. That was new to me as well.
Right.
So explain that a little bit more.
Absolutely. So I mean, most people buy life insurance to protect their families, right? And one of the big needs for life insurance, especially when you have younger kids and you have a mortgage and so on, you want to protect your spouse and your kids if something happens. So that makes a lot of sense. A lot of other people have actually bought these big policies for estate planning and tax planning purposes. Those needs change over time, right? So there's family disruption, so on and so forth. The latest one was the Trump tax changes that really raised the level of tax deduction for estate planning purposes, so on and so forth. So policies that people had bought a long time ago to kind of pay the tax bill are no longer necessary. And you can either let them lapse. So all those premiums that you paid to the insurance company over the years will just go to nowhere. Yeah. Or you can say, oh, you know what, I'm going to actually try to monetize what I've actually put into this policy by selling it to a life settlement company. And that life settlement company can actually give you quite a bit of money for it. So that's that business.
So they liquidate it. They literally give you cash back. They then own the annuity at that particular
They own the life insurance policy, and then we would wait. Our investors and the funds, they basically wait until that person passes away, and that's when they actually get their money back.
Wow.
On the death benefit of that policy.
So this is right back into the square root of actuarials, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're pulling these skill sets right back into this.
That's correct. Yeah. That's correct. And so again, bringing all of those my backgrounds together, is very, very helpful in terms of understanding this business.
A little bit about risk and measurement. This is fascinating to me, especially given that you've got this company that's got a multi-billion-dollar portfolio. But as you know, you came from companies that had $100 billion portfolio. Yes. Big numbers, more of a nimble company. So what are the measurements that you look for when you're managing risk, and especially in the role of data analytics?
Right.
I mean, is this come from a board level? Is it regulatory, or have you built maybe your own KPIs that say, this is how I know we're doing what we should do?
Right.
I mean, how much of that did you create, or do you have to do?
Right. So I would say, when I was earlier in my career, I was a bit naive, thinking that, especially when I started in enterprise risk management, thinking, we go to our board and we ask them what their risk appetite is, and they can tell us. And then when I realized the real world doesn't work like that, the board actually doesn't even know what the risk appetite is. Yeah. It's too complicated for them. So we actually have to design the framework and put it in front of them, saying, well, these are the things you should really look at, and kind of how you should monitor and measure risk and so on. And so the board usually, when they see a menu, they can tell you, I like this, I don't like that. So you have to actually put it in front of them. It's not the other way around.
Right.
At Vida, it's mainly longevity risk that we're focused on. We don't have to worry too much about some of the other risks that big institutions take, such as credit risk and investment risk, reinvestment risk. All of that stuff is not so. So that focus makes it a little bit easier, but at the same time, we're looking at multiple metrics within the company that are more related to, how an investor would measure the risk.
Yeah.
So, and for them, we're basically giving them some targets in terms of what the fund is going to earn, and we need to deliver on those targets, so on and so forth. So, we need to be mindful that the way we go about generating those targets for them is as diversified as possible, right?
And
so
are these customers, investors, probably synonymous? You know, your investors are your customers.
Correct.
Are these pensions and hedge funds and
Correct.
wealthy
Yes.
family offices?
Exactly.
Okay, they're
Exactly.
looking for these alternative
Exactly, and
vehicles.
they don't. I mean, it takes a lot of expertise to do this right. So there's no
Absolutely.
way they could kind of build that expertise on their own.
Right, that's exactly what's going through my head as you were
Yeah.
talking. It's a very much of a boutique feel.
Yes.
You know.
Correct. Yes.
What, as we kind of wind down, if we look Q3, Q4, as we're about to enter Q3, which is unbelievable, we're already halfway through the year. Where do you end up at the end of the year? What's another big milestone or two? Where on December 31st, you're feeling really good about Vida Capital and the data analytics, department.
Right. So I have some pretty big ambitions with what we're going to do. I mean, I like to do everything world class. So we're not. I didn't join when they were at world class. So I feel like there's a lot of we could do going forward.
Yeah.
So as I just said, we just turned on the lights with you guys in the cloud. I've turning on the lights in big data sources as well in other places. We now have to kind of become the glue between all of the different functions at Vida, and then we got to start to really introduce a lot more visualization into our analytics, improve the analytics, so on and so forth. So there's a ton of work for us to do.
You're not
kinda
short on work.
Going forward. So I like to do things in stages. So we're spending a lot of time staging that properly and making sure that we have constant delivery of things. So we spend some money, we should be able to show, look, we spend that money, we got something out of it. Look, we don't go away, give me $10 million, I'll come back in 2 years and I show you have nothing, so you can fire me. It's more like, no, you give me a little bit, I'll show you what I can do, and then we move on.
Yeah.
So we're actually spending a lot of time staging. So I'm not going out and hiring a very big team right now. So we need to kind of do that very, very well. So at the beginning, when you get off the ground, it's a bit of a hockey stick effect. So if you're just looking at the next couple of quarters, I can't say we're going to have these like monumental changes, but we're definitely doing things that are transformational already, just even with the amount of resources we have and how much money we spent. And I was actually just demoing some of it to my boss this morning and showing him how stuff that we were doing before I joined might have taken anywhere between 2 days to 2 weeks, I can now do in front of him in about 2 seconds, right? So that's the kind of stuff we're already starting to show the executive team, because it's difficult for them to actually even imagine my vision. So that's why it's really important for me to be able to show them concrete things along the way so they can see, oh, that's what Fred means he's talking about. And then they're willing to provide more funding because they see it live. Yeah.
Well, good. It was a great talk.
Yeah, same
All
here.
right. Thank you all for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at our next C-Level Chat. Thanks.